Welcome to the National Museum of the United States Navy and the 10th and final talk in our series on needs and opportunities in the modern history of the United States Navy. I am Michael Crawford. I'm Senior Historian here at the Naval History and Heritage Command. And today we are honored to have as our speaker Dr. Scott Truver. Dr. Truver is Director of Team Blue National Security Programs at Gryphon Technologies, which specializes in national and homeland security, naval strategies, policies, programs, and operations. Dr. Truver's doctorate is in Marine Policy Studies. After Scott has had his say, and enlightened us, then we will have a brief comment by Dr. Gregory Bereiter, who is, or B-Writer,
Either way, it's fine.
who is has his PhD from Northern Illinois University, and is a historian here with the command. And hopefully we'll have a little bit of time for some give and take with you all. So without further ado,
Thank you, Michael. Gosh, I lost my first page. Where did it go? Anyway, it's good to be here. I appreciate the opportunity to present my thoughts on where naval history might be going. And I was when Michael first sent me a note and invited me. It was to, I said, do you understand I'm not a historian, I'm a political scientist? He said, no, don't worry about it, we'll be fine. I said, I did take some history classes in the am I supposed to be doing this? Thank you. But most of them were like Renaissance and Reformation, because I was thinking about becoming a Lutheran pastor. So my approach to history was a little bit strange. So anyway, when we talked to Michael, he said, here's what I'd like you to do, is address the historiography of the Navy's security roles and operations throughout virtually the entire world since 1980, and specifically the Navy's role in counter-piracy since the 1820s. We met, he said everything is good, don't worry about it, and approach it for the goal is to provide a perspective on the post-Vietnam War, post-Cold War, post-9/11 Navy, and assess how the U.S. Navy operations have been addressed in the English language press, English language literature. And nevertheless, you can look at apologize for the green screen, but you can look at, well, we're taping this, so this can't do it. Anyway, what happened was I was particularly concerned about the words, everything of significance about global operations. And so I took the problem of bounding what I was supposed to be doing. I did a search of the command and the libraries, the Navy libraries holdings. I took advantage of the Naval War College, Naval Postgraduate School libraries. I talked to people at CNA, and undertook a search at the Library of Congress to come up, what does it mean when he says of operations? I gave up. So what I ended up doing is finding there's 158 named operations between 1980 and 2010. And I gave up on the counter-piracy operations. So I went in and talked to Michael again, said, how can we cut this down? Because some of this looked like it's going to cost thousands of hours to approach this. How do we do it? So I suggested to him, since I was interested in mine warfare, that we look at it, focus on two mine countermeasures operations in the post-1980s era. And they were the Mines of August, state-sponsored terrorist mining crisis in the Red Sea, and the Navy's Operation Intense Look response. The second was Desert Shield, Desert Storm Operation Candid Hammer. We'll come back to that. in the Arabian Gulf in 1990-1991. Now, Michael reminded me that my job was to put together a historiography of the treatment in the literature of these two operations, not the discussion of the operations themselves. And that created some problems because nowhere could I find candid hammer in the operations, although we did have the statement that there was an Operation Candid Hammer in the Persian Gulf during Desert Shield, Desert Storm. So what I ended up doing is going back and asked an informal community, said, have you folks, of people who were in the Persian Gulf at that time, and in some cases commanded ships and helicopter squadrons, I said, have you ever heard of it? Nope, never heard about that. Don't know what this is. So and the dates were uncertain because as I was going through it, I found people, we were all over the place in terms of what the actual dates were. So basically, I came up with an idea that from early August 1990 to early October 1991 was when Operation Candid Hammer, or Gulf War Mine Countermeasures Cleanup, was in place. So why do we care about this? One of the things was Michael asked me is to put this thing into context about what's the historical context of the two subjects, the Operation Intense Look and Candid Hammer. I said, well, see, we've been worrying about sea mines since and their countermeasures since Bushnell's Turtles, 1776. Mine warfare is figured prominently in virtually every war the United States has, from the Civil War, from the Spanish-American War, both World Wars, Korea, you name it, the mines have been encountered. The Navy is also increasingly worried about anti-access and area denial aspects of these weapons. And they are the quintessential A2AD threat. They can be put in place by virtually any platform, including ferry boats, and their low cost belies their effectiveness. We'll get back to that as well. Navy data indicate that there's about 1 million mines out there of 300 types, and the inventories of more than 50 navies. And that doesn't count other navies that buy weapons, and more than 20 countries export the weapons to anybody who has the money to buy them. And the Navy's experience in the test to the seriousness of the mine threat since World War II, mines have severely damaged or sunk 4 times more U.S. Navy ships than by any other means of attack. Okay, 4 of these 15 mine victims were minesweepers clearing the way in North Korea, but still that underscores the aspect of the threat. Beginning in 9 July, I'll go through, give just basic overview of the two operations that we're looking at. An Operation Intense Look was in 1984, and beginning on the 9th of July and continuing through the 20th of September, several commercial vessels reported underwater explosions in the Red Sea, and at least 16, perhaps as many as 19 ships transiting the Gulf of Suez as far as the south of Mandeb, Bab el-Mandeb, claimed they had been mined. Various extremist groups were all over themselves saying, we did it. And Islamic Jihad boasted that it had laid 190 mines to punish the imperialists. The Navy's MCM and EOD teams joined a loose coalition of international MCM capabilities from Egypt, France, Italy, Great Britain, the Netherlands, and the Soviet Union. The U.S. Navy's actual participation involvement in the theater was from 13 August to 1 October 1984, but the Navy detected no mines. Other MCM forces did sweep several mines, including ordnance that dated to before World War II. The Royal Navy force detected, rendered safe, and exploited a recently deployed weapon, the absence of sea growth indicating that the weapon hadn't been in the water for very long. And there was an advanced Soviet multiple influence mine of a design that we had never seen before in the West. It was later determined that the mines were deployed from the Libyan commercial ferry Gat, manned by a Libyan crew and the head of the Libyan Mine Lane Division. She entered the Red Sea southbound from the Suez Canals on 6 July, declaring herself loaded with general cargo. And she returned northbound with no cargo declared at the canal on the 23rd of July. Candid Hammer Gulf mine countermeasures operations commenced immediately, I think within hours of invasion. Navy was getting its helicopters ready to be deployed. And all elements of the MCM triad, EOD divers, mine countermeasures surface vessels, and mine countermeasures helicopters turned to the task. And EOD contingent also included marine mammal systems, which are used to detect and neutralize buoyant, closed, tethered, bottom, and buried mines. On 18 February, USS Tripoli, which had embarked the Navy's AMCM helicopters, and the guided missile cruiser Princeton suffered mine streaks. Princeton was restored in about a couple of hours with some of the warfare areas, but ultimately she was declared a mission kill and towed back to port. And despite a 16 by 20 foot gash below the waterline, Tripoli continued AM and CM operations for about 5 days afterwards. After hostilities ended, Iraq provided detailed charts showing the location and types of 1,167 mines. Clearance operations involved Belgium, France, Germany, Great Britain, Italy, Japan, and the Netherlands, as well as the United States. This was the last time since the last time that the Navy confronted a similar mining event was off the coast of Wonsan, North Korea in October 1950, when 3,000 Russian mines kept the UN task force basically at bay. And Rear Admiral Ellens, this is a quote that people always use with mine warfare, says, "We've lost control of the seas to a nation without a navy using pre-World War weapons laid by vessels that were utilized at the time of the birth of Christ." Okay. Pretty much is the case. And I was asked to provide an overview of everything of significance. So when I did that, I began a really focused search of the sources that I had talked about earlier today. I went to the Library of Congress looking for things. It was very difficult to use, so I stopped working with the Library of Congress. And a JSTOR, which is a journal storage search capability, produced little of value. I was taken aback by how good Google Scholar was, and identified lots of hits that were related primarily to the Operation Intense Look. Indeed, one search identified 13,400 items to be reviewed, focusing on Operation Intense Look. A similar search on Operation Candid Hammer provided much fewer results. I got 13 hits when searching on Candid Hammer. If I opened up the keyword search to Operation Intense Look, Red Sea, 1984, U.S. Navy mine warfare, I got another 13 or 14 hits. So there's a lack of treatment of the mine countermeasures capability, mine warfare performance in Persian Gulf. The one thing that saved my tush, frankly, was the fact that there's a mine warfare bibliography that's carried out and maintained by the Naval Postgraduate School under the supervision of Greta Marlott, who's a senior researcher. She, if you talk about mine countermeasures, you talk about mine warfare in the U.S. Navy, and you're looking for citations, you can go to Greta. She was immensely helpful. And Dr. Timothy O'Hara was a research scientist at the Center for Naval Analyses, also helped out by by doing some searches for me at the CNA library. What I'd like to do is just go through an overview of general articles or other things that were that focus on either the Operation Intense Look or the Operation Candid Hammer. My initial search turned up 215 articles related to Operation Intense Look that were published between 9 July and 21st October 1994. But there were only 13 articles that had focused on Operation Canton Hammer that spanned up more than a year of operations. So there's this discrepancy, and I cannot tell you why that's a discrepancy, but there's a discrepancy, significant one, between the availability of information and the open sources for Intense Look compared to what, Canton Hammer. 3 articles that turned out to be something of an unofficial history of the Operation Intense Look was the mines. I had an article in the May 1985 Naval Institute Proceedings, the Mines of August, an international whodunit. Have a copy of it up here. And Jan Bramer had an article called Intense Look, the United States Mine Hunting Experience in the Red Sea. And retired Royal Navy Captain John Moore had an overview of Red Sea mines, a mystery no longer. But among what must be tens of thousands of publications related to Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm generally, 13 articles specifically addressing mine countermeasures, topics in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, Canton Hammer provided varying value for historical purposes. Most were lessons learned, and they included such things as Captain Johnny Martin, who wrote on proceedings, we still haven't learned about dealing with a threat. Lieutenant Ernest Fortin addressed the nature mine threat, those damn mines, in the February 1992 proceedings, and offered suggestions on how to conquer them. In the October 1992 proceedings, Commander Rick Nagel outlined the difficult challenges that the EOD forces confronted. And in writing in the summer and fall 1992 amphibious review, Carl White discussed how the Navy's MCM assets addressed a shallow water threat. There was an international component of this thing, and we did find several articles. David Foxall had 4 articles in the International Defense Review, and Admiral Anthony Preston and Vice Admiral Joseph T. Wild talked about the mine countermeasures challenges from the Allies' perspectives. I included CNA in this. I included books, so I apologize. I could find no book-length history specific to either Operation Intense Look or Operation Canton Hammer in the Gulf War MCM. That's along the lines of Ed Marolda's history of the minesweeping operations in North Vietnam, Operation N-Sweep. There just simply isn't anything out there. But for Operation Intense Look, David Christ's Twilight War is very informative, weaves wonderful treatment of the discussion of how what the Libyan ferry actually did. Greg Hartman and I collaborated on the 1991 update of Weapons That Wait, Mine Warfare in the U.S. Navy. And Howard Levy's Mine Warfare at Sea in 1992 devoted just 3 pages to Intense Look and provides little that was new. Tam Moser-Melia, who wrote history of the damaged torpedoes, short history of U.S. mine countermeasures, provides good operational information, but only in 2 pages. So her entire book has 2 pages devoted to Operation Intense Look. If you turn to the Operation Canton Hammer in the Gulf War MCM, Anthony Kortesman and Abraham Wagner allocated 8 pages in their 1,000-page history, The Lessons of Modern War, Volume 4, the Gulf War 1996. They provided an excellent treatment of mine countermeasures operations. Marvin Pokrant, who is CNA analyst, wrote a book, Desert Storm at Sea, What the Navy Really Did, and he devotes an entire chapters of his book to Operation, the MCM ops in Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Chapter 12 is Post-Hostilities Mine Clearance. Chapter 15, Observations and Mine Countermeasures. And he's very tight, very challenging in his assessment of the capabilities. Admiralda and Robert Schneller's Shield and Sword in 1988 provided significant discussion of the mine threat and coalition mine countermeasures assets and has capabilities, and the post-conflict operation. Finally, Andrew Lambert wrote a chapter of Naval War in the Gulf War Assessed. He provided detailed analysis of the Royal Navy, of the naval campaign generally, but offers sharp judgment from a UK Royal Navy perspective about the major weakness of US mine countermeasures. And these 4 books make a significant contribution to the historiography of Desert Shield, Desert Storm. Now we'll go to CNA. I included CNA because they're the Navy's think tank. And we found 3 reports that dealt with operations, Candid Hammer, but could not find anything specific for Operation Intense Look. Maybe they've shipped it out to archives, they just couldn't find anything for me. Sabrina Edlow and her colleagues provided a chronology of U.S. Navy mining as opposed to mine countermeasures, and noted that the Navy deployed mines during the opening days of Operation Desert Storm. Dwight Lyons and his CNA colleagues discussed the mine threat, showstoppers or speed bumps in 1993, and concluded the lesson from Desert Storm is not that minefields are impenetrable, but that if you ignore the threat, you pay for it. The third is Ralph Paracelli and his colleagues produced a report, Desert Storm Reconstruction Report, Volume 4, Mine Countermeasures, October 1991. This remains classified, but people, colleagues who know what it says that it's very good, it's very objective, and it's very thorough in its treatment. I even looked at command histories to try to get some insight into the various operations, and I've included. I'll talk very briefly about this from the USS Shreveport, LPD-12. In response to orders received calling for embarkation of Helicopter Mine Countermeasure Squadron 14 with 4 RH-53D helicopters, Shreveport has been assigned to the support ship for airborne mine countermeasures in conjunction with Operation Intense Look, in response to the mining in Gulf and Suez and the Red Sea. That's a long sentence. Anchored off Ras Shukir on the 16th, and joined by USNS Harkness. The remainder of the day was on briefings, and followed up by commencing operations for the next 30 or 40 days. I was able to locate other command histories that I've incorporated in my final report, but I could not find much on data on the helicopter Squadron 14. Everything I was looking for was classified. And USS Adroit and USNS Harkness did not bother to complete an operational history, command history. And for government publications, we found the Department of Defense in April 1992 submitted its final report to the Congress, Conduct of the Persian Gulf War. It concluded that the Iraqi mine threat affected almost all naval operations during the Persian Gulf War. Mines had strategic impact. The May 1991 Department of the Navy CNO report, United States Navy in Operations Desert Shield, Desert Storm, served as a stepping stone for the development of the Navy's mine warfare strategy and master plan. They said the major conclusion was the conflict had again illustrated the challenge of mine countermeasures and how quickly mines can become a concern, and it highlighted the need for a robust, deployable U.S. Navy mine countermeasures capability. That was followed in January 1992 with the CNO's mine warfare plan, meeting the challenges of an uncertain world. It was initially produced for Admiral Kahune, Op 03. But as a result of increased awareness of the threats, Admiral Frank Kelso, CNO, personally approved the plan and became his champion. The objective of the plan was to put mine warfare in what later that year would be the from the sea strategic context. So the people who were preparing the mine warfare plan had access to thinking that was going on within OPNAV about the strategic context, and they were able to use that in framing their conversations. And finally, academic publications. Only a handful of international law publications were discovered by my search. And that included a post-1970 political geography of the Red Sea, a dam torpedoes international standards regarding the use of automatic submarine mines, and navigation through three straits in the Middle East, and the impact of not being a party to the 1982 conventional law. See, that's about pretty much that's out there. But there was a surprising number of mine countermeasures related papers at war colleges and postgraduate schools. However, there was little in them that was new, and most of them essentially regurgitated the existing work. But they did serve for putting into context policy and program advocacies. Dr. Ray Widmeyer, for example, and for the Industrial College of the Armed Service in 1993, wrote a strategic and industrial assessment of sea mine warfare in the post-Cold War era. And he was outlining a strategic framework for the industrial base, such as it was for mining. And my survey of the historiography of the two U.S. Navy mine countermeasures operations revealed what could have been figured out at the beginning of at the outset of the effort. As much as mines have had strategic, operational, tactical impacts, MCM remains a niche warfare area, and is even more so when the Navy's mines and minings are brought into the discussion. So it seems for histories of mine warfare operations too. There are challenges with working with the U.S. and subjects that have classified material. The CNA literally has thousands of classified materials reports related to Desert Shield, Desert Storm, but I had no access to them. Even the Naval NHHC had materials that I couldn't see because they were classified. Then that begs the question, where to look for mine warfare historical resources in the U.S. Navy? And this is problematic given the challenges of a fragmented warfare community. Mine warfare is in the Office of Chief of Naval Operations, Op 95, expeditionary warfare. But other naval warfare sponsors have overlapping and sometimes competing responsibilities for ships, helicopters, and unmanned systems. The Navy's mine warriors suffer from organizational churn. For example, prior to 2006, the commander of the Mine Warfare Command in Charleston, South Carolina, and then Ingleside, Texas, had operational control of the MCM triad in mines. Then the Navy disestablished Combine Warcom and stood up the Navy Mine and Anti-Submarine Warfare Command, NMOC, at San Diego, which commanded mine warfare as a secondary mission. The Navy disestablished NMOC in 2015 and has established a Surface and Mine Warfare Development Command, SIMWIDIC, still in San Diego for ships and helicopters, but I don't think they have operational control of forces. The force responsibility for the AMC helicopters is in the Commander Naval Air Force in San Diego, but the two MCM helicopters squadrons are based in Norfolk, Virginia. Go figure. And the Navy Expeditionary Combat Command has, in Little Creek, has responsibility for EOD. So from my perspective of having gone through all this is that conducting historical research in mine warfare is similar to a Where's Waldo evolution. It does not help when the community shoots itself in its foot. As mine warfare, let me take a swig here. And my colleague and friend and real world quality mine warfare expert George Pollard explained this to me in a conversation a couple of days ago. When Commine Warcom was in Charleston, there was an MIW archive kept at the Naval and Mine Warfare Training Center. This archive had operational data going back before World War I. When Commine Warcom moved to Corpus Christi, the archive was culled, and the part that was retained was restored in boxes in a secret vault at Commine Warcom. The rest of it was trashed. I was told that when Commine Warcom was disestablished and NMOC established, all remaining archive was destroyed. So whatever resources historians might have had available in mine warfare virtually was trashed when Commine Warcom was disestablished. And looking ahead since 1992, there has been no book-length publication focused solely on mine history and mine warfare in the U.S. Navy. But much has transpired since then. Mine warfare vision, strategies, threats, requirements, capabilities, R&D and acquisition programs, and operations all have been in flux. The U.S. Navy confronted an Iraqi mine threat in Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003, but nothing like the 1991 or 1950 events. Perhaps it's time we should update weapons that way, not being too self-service. But there's another prospect that would be, from my perspective, would be is a history of the Navy's marine mammal programs, because they have been excellent in dealing with the threats that they have to deal with. So my experience in the historiography of Operations Intense Look and Candid Hammer, Gulf War MCM, could easily be repeated for the other 156 operations that we talked about in the beginning of today. The operations, the official sources remain difficult and access due to classification, and where to locate sources and materials remains uncertain. But that's the stuff that real Navy historians deal with every day, as I understand it. So, in conclusion, at the end of the day, the issue is not whether we will experience a mining event, but when and where it will happen, and whether we will be able to and ready to defeat the A2AD mine threats. I recall reading something a while back about either learning from history or repeating it. And in that regard, I have no doubt that naval mines, like the poor, will be with us always. So my thanks to Michael Crawford and the command for the opportunity to share my thoughts and be part of this project. I want to thank the command's archivist, Tim Duskin, for his help with the command histories, and my colleagues, George Paulette, Norman Polmar, Peter Swartz, and Rick Williams helped out immensely to look at things in this discussion. And finally, Greta Marlett at the Naval Postgraduate School and Tim O'Hara at CNA were very, very important in the bibliographical search. So that's all I have. And Greg's going to offer commentary.
Good afternoon. My comments in response to Scott's presentation will briefly address two major issues. First, I'd like to consider the challenges of researching and writing about recent operational history in general. And then secondly, I'd like to suggest some other potential avenues for future historical work on mine warfare in the U.S. Navy and also in coalition or allied navies. Scott's presentation has touched on a crucial challenge for naval historians in general: how to approach the recent past. While many problems and methods are similar regardless of the time period, recent operational history introduces particularly challenging obstacles, from ephemeral digital sources to surviving participants with an extremely vested interest in how their history gets written. Historians who seek to write about recent naval operations, especially its more obscure aspects like naval mine warfare, confront challenges and dilemmas that our graduate training often does not fully prepare us to navigate. Historians are trained to work in archives, to research in archives. But as Scott has pointed out, most official documents dealing with recent mine warfare operations remain classified and will probably be so for the foreseeable future. Thus, anyone outside the family seeking to work on this topic likely won't be able to access many of the documents they need to reconstruct a given event. This forces a very heavy reliance on eyewitness accounts. But historians would never rely solely on the historical recollections of historical actors, say, in the 17th century or 18th century, and trust exactly what they said, what they said happened. So, despite the fallibility of memory, however, oral histories are important historical records of insights that cannot be found in written documents. Our job is to bring together myriad resources so that we might not only reconstruct what actually happened, but also interpret the meaning of what happened in the broadest possible terms. Despite these challenges, some potential avenues for future historical work on naval mine warfare do definitely exist. Some of the most exciting recent work on mine warfare focuses on the later 19th and early 20th centuries. Two recent articles in the Journal of Military History stand out in this regard and also demonstrate the promise of current research into this topic. Timothy Walter's examination of Confederate electric torpedo development in the American Civil War provides a very fascinating perspective on the ways in which mining technology, memory, and history were closely interconnected. Richard Dunley's assessment of late 19th century Royal Navy demonstrates how the RN proactively engaged with the new technology of mine warfare, particularly controlled mining, shaping this technology to suit its particular strategic and cultural requirements. There may also be an opportunity for historians of World War I to re-examine aspects of the North Sea mine barrage, which was established primarily on U.S. initiative between March and June of 1918, in an effort to restrict the movements of German U-boats from the North Sea into the Atlantic. Jumping forward a bit, historians of the Cold War era Navy should also note that one of the key aims of the NATO maritime strategy was to prevent the exit of Warsaw Pact naval forces through the Danish Straits or the Turkish Straits into European waters, or the exit of Soviet Pacific Fleet forces through the La Pérouse Strait and the Korea Strait into the Pacific. Lastly, in light of present escalating tensions with China and Russia, both of whom together are thought to possess something like 350,000 sea mines, historians of the very near future will likely need to engage in comparative historical analysis of anti-access and area denial warfare against these two maritime competitors. Thank you.
Well, we have plenty of time for discussion. So, Greg and Scott, would you like to come up, or would you like to bring a chair, or would you want to stand? Whatever. And open the floor to discussion.
I will. I'm John Pearson. I was coming my work on at the time that the center got moved out to, not to San Diego, out to Corpus Christi from Charleston, when we lost apparently all these records and so forth that we had with the training command. I think I understood.
Yes, sir, that's what George says.
Okay, well, I will accept responsibility for that loss. But I'm surprised that there is so little literature. You know, I think that I can think of another key study that CNA did about the value of ARMCM from Desert Shield, Desert Storm. And it basically said that they were very good at what they did, number one. And number two, the only thing that snafu'd them at all was when they get intel on mine locations that were bum. But anyhow, as a follow-up to that, in 1993, we sent an integrated MCM force, air, MCM ships and EOD guys over to the Big Blue Harrier operation in Europe. we came away from that having discovered far more mines than anybody else. And I would say largely because of air mine countermeasures. Chairman Admiral, 3-star Admiral Rader, who ran that operation for NATO, took the trouble to send a message to our CNO. It says, I don't care what you do in the future with mine countermeasures, but keep the air MCM branch. And the command ship, which we had at that time, was Tripoli. Tripoli?
Later than it was Incheon.
Yeah, it was Incheon, you're right. In fact, she played that role in that exercise before she even got converted to become the command ship. But I gotta think there's a lot of, try the National Academy of Sciences, the Naval Study Boards, they've done at least 7 when I was con mine work on, intense studies about mine warfare, pro and con concepts, capabilities, and so forth. There's got to be more out there than what you were able to find there, Scott. I just think it's in different organizational control than a lot of warfare areas don't suffer from, other than mine countermeasures. But as far as the move out to NMOC in San Diego, I wasn't involved in that one, but there are one heck of a lot of tactical things that were investigated by, not Sharon, but Myra, the equivalent of the ship ASW evaluation methodology that was down in Bull Creek with SWEDGE, Surface Warfare Development Group. There's tons of that stuff that never got acted upon. It was in the combine work on files, but also in NMOG files, because I don't think they had the staffing necessary to put it into operation. Or at least that's why SWEDGE went away. The Myron portion of SWEDGE, because although they were generating a lot of tactical improvements, they weren't being enacted by combine work on or by NMOG. So there's got to be more history than we're seeing here.
Well, in comment in your comment, when I structured this, my paper,
I didn't say it would be easy to find.
Oh no, what I'm saying is that in the first part, we said, okay, we're gonna focus on operations only and not exercises or anything else. So there's a ton of stuff that's out there related to exercise, and it's going to be a history of the program and not an analysis of problems to be dealt with. But okay. In many cases, I came across references to a certain study, for example. When I finally got it, it was like Ray's piece on the industrial base. It proposed a certain thing and used previous histories as the historical precedent that we have to worry about. For example, the Mines of August has been used. I was pleased to find out how much immortality I have through various citations and footnotes. But we on purpose did not focus on non-operational aspects.
Okay.
Norman, I'm sure.
What did I forget, Jerry Bill?
I don't.
Sounded like you hit it all.
Well, Scott, I'm a little surprised that you couldn't find more from the squadrons in their command histories. You know, because we always did an end of action report. I certainly did one for Intense Look because I was there.
Right.
And if they're not at the squadron, then they're combat air land. At their level.
Well, we found several, but not all. So I'm using other sources. I did have a couple of PIO requests that went down to HM 14, and I can't remember the conversation, but this is classified. So, okay, what can I do? Well, so we basically took, and yes, there is information out there, but I simply could not get to it. And that's what
Probably.
that Greg pointed out.
Yeah, as Greg pointed out, the issue of what's classified and what's not classified. I mean, this was 30 years ago. It shouldn't be classified anymore. In fact, I can certainly remember that the Libyan ship DAP was certainly classified when I was there. Nobody could talk about it.
Yeah, and I got reviewed by lockdown security based on some of the data that was there. Where did you get this information? New York Times. Well, that explains a whole lot.
Try one more,
Admiral,
Scott.
please.
I want to make sure everybody understands that I think Scott did as good a job as he possibly could have done. There's a lot of source material of other types as well. But Scott has done more for the Mayan warfare community in his history, I think, than anybody else in terms of following our plight when we are in the down cycle as well as in the up cycle, and trying to keep putting in the input for the Mayan warfare plan run by OpNav ever since 1992, when that plan first came into being. Back then, I think Captain Manley here was Op 36. Well, you had been Op 36 just before that, Jerry, or during Desert Shield, Desert Storm? Right. Other good source. Of course, now we're talking people, individuals. There are some good sources around, like Major General Harry Jenkins, General Retired, Major General Retired. General Retired Jim Jones, the former commandant. All had some heavy input into Mayan warfare, Mayan countermeasures in particular, in terms of improving the capabilities and the people. So.
Yeah, but that is important for the next Mayan warfare history. Our task wasn't to talk about, to go out and do an oral history with Major General Jenkins. It was to take what was published in the English language literature. So there's a lot of stuff that did that just didn't make the cut because it was not a published document, whether it's published as a command history or something in the naval history proceedings.
One of the things, I'm Bill Arnold. I was an AMCM pilot on Intense Look. But what's important is all these operations drove acquisition programs. For example, Intense Look drove a need for precise navigation. It drove a need for ROVs. It drove a need for mine identification. We couldn't sweep the mines where we were because we were in the middle of an Egyptian oil field. So we had to find them and identify them. The Iraqi operation, drove a requirement for a self-contained sweep system for the H-53s, because once the Tripoli was mined, it wouldn't get any closer. The ships wouldn't get any closer than 25 miles from the minefield. So the 53s had to tow a sled 25 miles at 25 knots. Each way.
The time on station was?
Yeah, cut you down to an hour on station. So, it drove a requirement for a self-contained sweep system for the 53s.
Yeah, and that was frankly the reason why the Navy put out its first Mayan warfare plan. There's a secret no-form version of this, and Norman and I had a hand in this. We found ourselves working for OPO 6 on From the Sea. At the same time, there was a lot of cross-fertilization between conversations that were going on in one branch of OPNAV, one From the Sea, and another branch of OPNAV for the Mayan warfare plan. So when this came out, Kelso had no problem with it at all. Matter of fact, I found myself at a briefing where Bob O'Donnell, Captain O'Donnell, who was the branch head, was briefing the CNO, and the only open chair was next to the CNO, so he says, sit down. No, I don't want to do that. But it became, based on this, an entire 5-year plan, maybe even longer, with R&D, was produced. So but this had history in it. It wasn't primary history. We used secondary sources for the most part. But it was trying to do a historical aspect. Sir?
No, I say it was available.
Okay.
Just a comment, if I may, about the U.S. NATO plans to blockade the Danish Straits and the Turkish Straits. The Soviet Navy had zero plans to send anything out from the Baltic into the Atlantic. No submarines, there were no nuclear subs in the Baltic, and no Soviet Navy units in the Baltic were tagged to go out into the Atlantic in time of war. As far as the Black Sea goes, once war started, no Soviet surface units or diesel submarines, there were no nuclear subs in the Black Sea. No Soviet naval forces were to go through the Dardanelles once war began because they knew they couldn't do it. Not because of mine warfare, but submarines because of the net and because the Turks controlled every inch of the passage. So I find it interesting how we made up plans and talked about blockading the Danish Straits and the Turkish Straits when war began. The barn door syndrome.
Anything else? Things I should have said? Things I should have said? Your call, honestly.
Well, no more comments? No more questions?
I'll buy you a sandwich and glass for two. Okay, 2 glasses.
Exchange from cards. Networking.
It's been said, and I don't know how true this is, but it's been said that naval history, in order to have an audience and have support, needs to serve the Navy. In other words, it has to have a practical purpose that it has to be usable, producing a usable history. So that brings up the question of audience. Who is the audience of the operational histories of the United States Navy? Now, everybody, loves a good story, and operations you often have good stories. But here in the Naval History and Heritage Command, one of our major missions is to serve the needs of the navies and to write histories that are useful to the Navy. So I don't know where I'm going with this. But anyway, so the question is, what would an operational history, say a mine warfare or of any other type of warfare in the Navy, look like in order to be of practical use to operators and planners in the Navy? Any ideas, suggestions? Well, food for thought. Well, I want to thank you for all your attention, and I want to thank our speakers, Dr. Truver and Dr. B. Ryder. This, as I said, was the last of a series of 10 talks on the historiography of the modern Navy and needs and opportunities. The intention is to basically lay out a guide or an agenda for future work on the history of the Navy, modern Navy. The first of the talks has been edited and posted on our website. The talk was back in October last year. All of the talks will eventually be edited and posted, so watch for them this winter. And perhaps after we get them all up and edited, we might produce a book out of it. And hopefully, our intention is that as a collection, the 10 pieces will serve as kind of a guide and agenda for work on the history of the Navy for the next generation. So, thank you.